Welcome to today's Software AG webcast titled ARIS Connect, How You Can Achieve an Enterprise-Wide Rollout for Your Digital Transformation. Today's webcast will be presented by Dr. Dominik Vanderhaeghen, Director of Product Management at Software AG. As we move through today's presentation, I invite you to submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A box, which is located in the top right corner of your webcast dashboard. We will address your questions at the end of today's program. In the event that we're not able to answer your question, your submission will be recorded, and today's presenter will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. Additionally, today's presentation is being recorded. This program recording will be available on the ARIS playlist of the Software AG YouTube channel later today. Before I turn today's presentation over to Dominik, I would like to briefly introduce you to Software AG. Software AG helps companies with their digital transformation. With Software AG's digital business platform, companies can better interact with their customers and bring them on new digital journeys, promote unique value propositions, and create new business opportunities. In the Internet of Things market, Software AG enables enterprises to integrate, connect, and manage IoT components, as well as analyze data and predict future events based on artificial intelligence. The digital business platform is built on decades of uncompromising software development, IT experience, and technological leadership. Software AG has more than 4,500 employees, is active in 70 countries, and had revenues of €879 million in 2017. With that, it is now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Dominik Vanderhaeghen.
Thank you very much, Will, for the introduction. Also, welcome from my side. I would like to talk today about a topic which is, from my perspective, a quite important one, because at the end of the day, it really can make a digital transformation a success or actually can fail. And I'm going to talk about the rollout of your digital transformation, especially the role of business information, the role of end users, and how you get all the different pieces together. So the agenda for today is pretty packed. So first, I would like to talk about what's transformation all about. So for sure, everybody's talking transformation, everybody thinks he's in transformation, but what does it actually mean? Then the next step, I would like to give some ingredients, what we think are important for a successful rollout, to share some ideas with you that you can take with you in your daily work. And then I would like actually to bridge the gap and talk about business information and what's the role of business information in that context. And for sure, we will end with a short summary and also have, as Will introduced already, some option for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. So what's transformation all about? So what's the scope of a transformation? What's the situation that a lot of companies are actually in? And I would actually like to think of a picture that everybody of us actually knows. Just think of your doctor that recommends you what you should do in order to stay healthy. So that's basically the same situation with organizations. So I guess that all of you, they don't call it that way, but all of you have to some extent corporate transformation doctors in your organization, which actually recommend what should be done in the future. Maybe they're coming from outside, share their ideas with you. Maybe they're coming from inside. So basically we see that every company is in a transformation stage all the time. So it never actually stops. So what's basically your main challenge in your industry? Maybe you are aware of that, maybe you're not. So what we see quite often actually is becoming digital is something which is quite important. So just think of the banking industry and actually, for instance, new disruptive business models from the fintech companies coming, which completely change the way how banks do their business. So every large bank in the world has to rethink their business model for the future, and they're actually doing that. So this actually shapes the way how the organization changes in the future, and companies have to ask a lot of questions. But it's not just the banking industry, it's basically every industry. So every industry has to rethink the way how they do business, how they modernize, or maybe it's just a situation that they are very large, but still want to stay or keep their competitiveness, their innovative culture, which is for sure something which is quite hard to achieve. So you have a lot of duties, you have a lot of customers, you have a lot of products, but at the same time, you want to be innovative. So there are a lot of topics. I think you've heard of robotics, process automation, which is a huge topic. Cloud is a huge topic. So all these topics and a lot more actually drive you towards change. And I guess that if you have just thought of the idea of your corporate transformation doctor, maybe you now have in your inner eye somebody in front of you where you think, yeah, that's the corporate transformation doctor in our organization. You probably see that he's actually driving change or recommending something that you want or should do in the future. So actually what we see as a next step when we think of transformation, we definitely see that companies want to be excellent, they want to be great, they want to be good, they want to achieve the best customer satisfaction in the world. And we actually see that it almost always starts from the first thing, they want to achieve consistency in what they do. They want to be great, they want to be good. And when we look at what customers actually did in the past, in order to achieve this corporate excellence, we've seen basically that a lot of those companies are setting up master repositories which act as the single source of truth for business information. I will talk about that a bit later. But having really a repository about the truth, how the business works, is a crucial thing. So this definitely is the foundation actually for any business those companies do. So they're offering services, they're offering products, they're offering bundles of both basically, and it's important to keep in mind that this common source of truth actually is something which can the whole organization benefit of at the end of the day. And then what we see for sure when we think of business transformation, I will talk about that on my next slide as well, we clearly see that the business processes are the backbone and the central thing that you are able to change when you want to adapt, when you want to transform your company. And it really applies to a lot of stakeholders within your company. So just think of your company wants to be more excellent as of today. And it starts for sure with a top-level management buy-in. They have to think of scoping, they have to think of budget. But it also ends at the end with all the individual employees who actually perform in their daily business in excellence in what they do and how they deliver service to a customer, for instance. So this is really something which is important. Achieve consistency in what you do. And then now thinking a bit further, how is it actually implemented? So we see that the streamlining of documents and systems, just as an example, there are a lot of more, but just as an example, is a classical use case or a program that we see in a lot of customers. So there's definitely the need and also the drive that we see in a lot of customers that they want to streamline the way how they do corporate documentation, how people get access to information, and they want to reduce the number of the different systems they have in place. Every customer or every company has a history, has maybe acquired other companies, systems are getting integrated with other systems, repositories are getting integrated with other repositories, and after some time you really have a large, huge infrastructure. And we definitely see a lot of programs who try to make sure, or which try to make sure that there's a streamlining in documents and system that we see. But the system side is one side. The other side is for sure how you can reduce it, so from how many systems to how many systems in the end. But what I actually would like to say, it's also about thinking of the content. We see a lot of customers who actually have a lot of ungoverned documents in the organization. People are following their own guidelines when they do the business. They've developed their own best practices all the day. And it's really, really hard for an organization actually to take care on transformation and to drive change in the organization when they are not aware of the best practice documents which are out there in the organization. So there's definitely a huge need to make those documents also as a subject for streamlining and also coming from an ungoverned space to governed space where you have clear responsibilities of documents, of best practices, and make sure actually that the company is really following all in the same direction with all the people who are sitting in the same boat at the end of the day. So let's talk a bit about transformation. So when we now think of what transformation actually is, I researched a bit. There was a nice definition from Techopedia that you can find when you also search for it. And I love it a lot because it clearly tells us what the digital transformation means. We hear it quite often, but what actually is within it. And this definition says it's about the change associated with digital technology application, integration, and it's being integrated into all aspects of human life and society. That's for sure a very broad way to look at it. But it's also thinking from physical to digital. Just think of what's happening in our world. You see a lot of physical devices which now get represented in the Internet of Things in a digital world, so that you can actually see, for instance, where your parcel is. Maybe you can manage it. You can see what's the temperature within it. So there are a lot of changes taking place actually based on a technology which is evolving from year to year, and we see that this is a huge impact actually on the way how we do business. But thinking a bit more specifically, it has a huge impact on how people interact, how the people are working in their everyday work. So, and again, we're coming to the point, it's about the streamlining of the business processes, because the business processes, this is a framework to think of what a company is actually doing. It's a way how to describe what companies are actually doing. And thinking of digital transformation, it's in the end applying technology to the way how you do business, with thinking of the people, with thinking of the systems, and reshaping for a better future. What we see as well when we think of digital transformation and having a successful rollout, that it's very crucial that you have an understanding where you are in terms of the maturity level. So for sure, not every company is on the same maturity level to think of digital transformation, to think of business processes. We have here some framework on a slide that we can see there. So there are some companies which are still at the level which do not have any process documentation at all, and thus it's very hard actually to change, and also to change the future if you have no idea on how the business is being performed as of today. But then this is the first stage that you have to go into. So to think of documented processes as a first entry level, to think of business process modeling in order to get an understanding on your future transformation business processes, your to-be processes. And what we then see at the next level is typically to think of a more structured way to make it even better. Maybe you came in the past from a project where you have reached a level 1 on documented processes, but then you definitely see that this is not a one-time task that you can do in a project. So thinking about business processes, about describing the way how you do business in your organization is really a task which needs to be done all the time. Then it's definitely all about setting up a structured repository where can you reuse the information for several purposes. Maybe you have IT system implementation projects, maybe you have organizational re-engineering projects. So a lot of those different transformation initiatives and programs benefit in the end when they have access to one common business repository. So then the next step is always about thinking of how to bring the information from the repository to the people and to make really what you've defined in your repository a reality of the people. So it's about getting governed and deployed processes which are executed in daily business. And then next step is to think of really not just how business should change, also to measure in a continuous way actually where you are, actually what the gaps are that you can still see in your daily business. And at the end of the day, and I think that's the common goal we all share, basically you would like to achieve a digital twin of the organization, to really have an understanding of all the aspects of your company and to be able to actively manage all these aspects: the organization, the strategy, the customer expectation, the risks, the IT system architecture, and so on and so on. And in a nutshell, I think you have to have an understanding basically where you are with your existing initiatives and with your existing look at your business processes. And I typically recommend to not take too many steps at once, because it might then get hard. I think it's already a venture actually to get from one level to the next level. But you definitely should work through those different levels and to reach all the different steps. But be aware of where you are and then think of what's your next step and what's your next step when you think of your transformation journey in the future. So let's now talk a bit more about successful rollout. So what does it mean? And I would like to talk about 4 ingredients. I would like to share some ideas, some questions I have for you that I think you should ask yourself, and where you maybe get some ideas for your own project in your organization. And the first thing is, I clearly would like to recommend that you think from the end and ask, what's your customer? It might be your internal customer, it might be your external customer, but you have to think from the end. Don't think, actually, what can I do next? And then think, where do you want to be at a certain point in time? What's the desired output that you would like to achieve? And then you basically derive from this the way towards today, and to decide actually what are the journey steps that you want to fulfill. It's like when you go on vacation, you think of the vacation target first before you actually get into the car and start to drive to some direction. And I would actually like to use the picture of the bait. So what's the bait for? And I think all of you know this. What's the bait for? Is it on the one side, is it for the fishermen? Because typically fishermen think of, oh, what might be a good bait? So what do I like? What don't I like? Or is it really in the end, is it for the fish? And it's the same in your digital transformation journey. So you have a project ongoing. Think of, what are your customers? Those customers in the end will decide if you are successful with what you are doing. And ask them actually, how do you get them into the boat? What's the bait for those type of customers? And it might be different. So maybe you're talking about new business models, and you want to attract a certain customer segment, like I said, maybe in the banking industry, and you see fintech is increasing as something which is a disruption in the banking industry. Think of, what are your customers? What is driving those customers, and and how can you get close to the needs of those customers? So really think from the end, and that's the first recommendation I would like to give. Second, I would like to recommend to you that you think of who can accompany you during your journey. Because transformation is not just a task, it's really a journey. And yeah, it's not just a journey which takes one day, it's really a journey which takes weeks, months, even years to come through. And yeah, you definitely have to have people in the boat who are actually working with you. So it might sound a bit stupid, but I think it is the case, like you see it on the slide here. So we see that from nature as well. Together we are stronger. So you see birds swarm there on one picture. It's clear that more people are more stronger together when they're following the same goal actually than people which are fighting themselves only. So I think we definitely all have to ask ourselves much more often, who can help us in our journey and to achieve what we would like to do. So the obvious next step is you should definitely search in your organization and ask, are there people who share the goals that you have with your digital transformation? Maybe you're not aware of them. Maybe you don't know them. You definitely have to put some effort into the research to find people who might have an interest in the outcome of what you are actually doing. And then you should work with them and make sure that they are always behind you and are always supporting you when you try to get some transformation objectives achieved at the end of the day. So it's also important that you actually highlight the benefit of your initiatives to others. I think that's very crucial, basically. When you're doing transformation, when you want to get a successful rollout, you have to convince people for sure, and you definitely convince them by talking about values, not just about what you do, or also actually what provides an output and added value for you, for other stakeholders, but also especially for them, so that you find the common ground, the shared goals that you have with them. And I would actually like to propose that you think of the following roles that you might want to establish in your organization. It's not a formal role, so it's not something that I think HR has to approve as a role, but think of it as a part of your transformation journey. And I think the first one, thinking of business processes as the central thing you want to change for the future, for being successful in your transformation. Think of a really active and committed process owner community. Because change very often starts with the buy-in of the management, and even if maybe people who are doing the business, who are owning part of your business, are not thinking all the day in terms of processes. They might be at the same time already process owner and have a process ownership because they own actually what's happening in their organization. They own the outcome of their processes. So establish them as an actively committed process owner community. Second is definitely have people in the boat who can actively contribute to your transformation platform and to the repository I mentioned before. So to have designers, people who can contribute their knowledge in order to make transformation happen. But it's also about getting feedback. Because I think it's the worst thing that you can do, that you develop something in your ivory tower which does not fit to the reality outside, because you have never spoken to the people in the field who are actually doing business. So just imagine you're working on new processes in a retail shop, and you've never talked actually to the customers who typically go into the retail shop, or to the people who are working on the shop floor, what their reality actually is. So you definitely have to have a feedback loop, feedback mechanisms established to find out if what you've developed in your mind or with smart people in the room, that it fits to the reality. And you have to get continuous feedback loops and make sure that you run into the second iteration of your transformation proposal, third iteration, and so on, until it fits in at the end of the day. And then it's, I would like to call it the sell the idea community, because thinking about transformation is very much about selling ideas. And I think that's quite crucial. I've learned that also from some of our customers, which clearly told us that they have a lot of different pitches available for different target groups when they run into transformation projects. And they make sure actually that they always have the right pitch in their pocket actually when they meet somebody, in order to talk about their project, about their transformation, and to make them part of the journey. So this is definitely something that you should think of from my perspective. Sell the ideas, getting up a community which actually can sell the idea, and it makes it at the end of the day easier for you to get through your transformation journey. So the third one is definitely about inform people through the change cycle. So you might know this model that I show now on my slide. So it's the so-called Kübler-Ross model. So it came a bit from research where people, or let's say where researchers described the process that people are going through when they are encountered with diseases. That's actually where it's coming from, and it's, as of today, used very often in the context of change management, because from my perspective, it describes in a very good way actually the reactions that human beings have when they are encountered with something they did not expect, so a change that they have to encounter. And at the first time, people are typically shocked. So that's the first initial situation that people see. Oh my God. So they're really shocked, and they are waiting actually what's happening next. So, and the next typical step is actually they're in the denial phase basically, and they think, this cannot be. Is this really true? And then they get angry, which is quite strange. So she should not have done this to us. This is something which does not make sense, and then they maybe get part of the game and are bargaining, and at the end of the day, they are accepting the change. So I think it's a simple model. Maybe it's a little bit simplified in the end, but from my perspective, it explains also quite well when you roll out a change to the organization, you probably have to encounter all these different stages towards your target groups, and I think it's important to know what's happening in order to have the right reaction in your pocket, and that you have the right initiatives or tasks planned in order to encounter this reaction. So maybe it's more about information, maybe it's more about the emotional side that you have to talk about to the people, but in the end you can definitely help people through the change cycle, and I think that's a quite important thing to keep in mind. And I would like just to share with you the idea to get a bit more into the research side of this when you're running transformation projects, because it can make you more successful in your rollout in the end. The fourth, I already mentioned, is definitely establish feedback mechanisms, and I call it to feed the transformation beast, because it's something which is really also consuming a lot of resources, which definitely has a huge impact. So you definitely have to take care of it. And I have two recommendations here. So first, I would like to recommend give something first. So inform people in your organization what's happening with your digital transformation, why you do it, and when results will be expected. Maybe this is at a stage where you cannot yet or do not want to share results yet, but it's fine actually for people to know that there's something ongoing, because just remember the transformation cycle I mentioned before, it gives the people already some time to run through this transformation cycle and to get used to a certain idea, so that they get closer to the acceptance phase actually when the results are developed. And then what we've seen also quite often is that there is training video being put in place in organizations, which really also in a fun way describes what's happening, what's the outcome, in order to get some enthusiasm spread across the community. And I think that's quite important, and I definitely see this much more often nowadays within our customer base, as it's not so complicated anymore to have some nice video produced and to share it with different communities. But then it's not just giving something, it's also getting something back again. So you should definitely ask for feedback. You should take this feedback quite seriously and consider this. As I said before, I think the worst thing is only be in an ivory tower, develop the idea, don't talk to anybody, and in the end, deliver something which does not fit to the reality. So this must not happen. And I would like to think of the image of some kind of temperature sensors in your organization, so that you definitely have some sensors. It might be people that you know very well that you can talk to quite often, or it might be some other indicators that you see that you develop in order to make sure that you have an understanding, is your organization hot or not about your topic. And for sure, coming from this, and think again of the corporate transformation doctor. If you have fever and if you are not feeling very well, it's definitely worth to be aware of that situation and to take some measures and to do something against it. And the same applies for transformation. Let's now talk about the business transformation side, or the business information side. So what did I mean when I said how you can achieve a successful rollout of business information in the context of digital transformation? And I would like to talk here about content and tooling a bit, because I would like to propose that you think of your organization like a house. Everybody knows what a house is. Maybe you build something you own, maybe you're renting a house, but you definitely know that it has many parts and it always follows a plan. So there's nothing in your house except maybe the furniture that you have in there and the stuff that's in there, but think of the walls and the roof and the carpet and whatever. It definitely follows a plan. And it definitely has a single or multiple purposes, which is quite important. And the important thing now actually is you can build a house, you can modernize it, and you definitely have to think of the dependencies in your company, which is quite important. And why do I introduce this picture for you? Because it's something that we did with the ARIS world already in the past quite intensively, because we actually have the image or the metaphor of a company as a part of the so-called ARIS house, which clearly gives you some dimensions to describe how an organization works. So it's about thinking of the organizational structure. It's thinking about the products and services which are delivered in the end. It's about the information and the data which is processed every day. It's about what's being done in terms of tasks, so we call that functions. And then it's in the end about the backbone, the business processes, which brings all these different dimensions together. So this is, from my perspective, a very nice framework that you can use also for your digital transformation. When you think of you want to change your organization, you want to describe it in terms of processes, but then you definitely have to think of the different dimensions that this house might have, which are crucial to your organization or to your transformational change. Thinking one step further, from my perspective, you definitely have to think of the facets, the aspects which are important in your organization. And I love this framework here on the slide. It definitely shows you that there are so many different domains that you should think of or have to think of when you want to evolve with your company. So it's thinking about strategy and customer. As said before on the slide, it's thinking about organization. It's thinking about risk, thinking about knowledge, or thinking about quality, IT performance, and then again bringing all different pieces together in the process context. I think it's a huge journey that let's say transformation or companies which go through transformation have, and a lot of use cases which come along with that. I just want to recommend you that you are aware of these different domains and that you make sure that you look at the important domains that really can help you in order to drive the transformation at the end of the day. So, thinking in terms of change as a life cycle, and clearly is a life cycle, we definitely see that you typically start with a redesign of the transformational change. And at this stage, it's about good content and good quality for sure. So you have to have a description of your business processes in the organization, and it definitely has to be good. It has to be relevant. It has to be applicable to the people who, at the end of the day, should follow the plan. And then it's about the active ownership. So to have people, as I said before, process owner community, who can review and approve transformational changes, and really making sure that this is not just put on paper, that is really, and this is then the next step basically, that's really put into reality. So you have a lot of people who basically have to follow the plans you've developed in your transformation journey, the business process descriptions, the policies maybe, and for sure this has to be accepted by the people who actually have to should follow the plans which come out of the transformation journey. And then it's, again, closing the loop through feedback cycles. So to make sure it's really relevant, it gets more relevant, the feedback's being incorporated. So it's definitely a cycle. And as I said at the very early stage of the presentation today, it's basically you have a common repository in the middle, which shares the views of these different, let's say, stages in your change life cycle, and to make sure that there's a common source of truth established. And I actually would like to introduce some, I call it now the world of a stakeholder. And you definitely see the first stage, it definitely starts with the world of the domain architect. So I guess you all have them in an organization. Maybe you have the data architects, you have the IT architects, you have the business process architects available. So they're all thinking very much about this stages here, and they're for sure benefit and especially get data into the common repository which stands in the middle. And then it's about the world of management stakeholders as well, people who might have a different view on the repository, who are maybe not so keen on seeing all the details, but who just actually want to make sure that the organization is compliant, that there are no outdated policies in the organization, maybe are taking care of change requests and so on. So then it's the world of, I call it the world of employees without dedicated role. So people who actually consume information from the repository, maybe operating procedures that tell them how they have to do their job. So they definitely benefit as well from the common repository in the middle. And then I said it's also about the world of supporters, people who can contribute or can maybe give some additional feedback. And I would like to show you some examples how can deep dive into the world of those different stakeholders with the ARIS platform. But before I do that, I definitely want to say all of those different stakeholders, they are all end users. And I think it's equally important to think of all of them. So there are your internal or external customers. You have to think of them. How are they being put as a part of the transformation journey? What's their need? And as I said, with the ingredient number one, think from the end, think from the customer. So for whom is the bait? Is it for the fisherman or is it for the fish? So think of the different needs of those people. So let's now have a look actually what we do for the, let's say, for the different people. So let's first talk about the world of the domain architects. And I've taken 2 to 3 examples for each area. For the architects, it's for sure giving them a powerful way to describe a company, so to describe the different aspects of a company, to build up a common framework of the company. So maybe talk about the organizational structure and setting up organizational chart models which are part of the repository. Or maybe thinking about regulations which needs to be described as a part of policy management, risk management. Also think of an IT systems architecture which needs to be described in order to describe, for instance, for operating procedures, what people what systems people should use when they work at a certain step at the end of the day. So it's having a powerful modeling environment to make sure that those domain architects have all the ways actually to describe. So that's for sure what we do with ARIS since quite a long time. And the second example I would like to show here is basically a part or a screenshot from our ARIS Connect platform, from the ARIS Connect designer, where you see a lightweight modeling environment running in the browser, where the process architects have the possibility to describe the processes, to describe properties of those processes, to describe who is owning which process, for instance, or maybe also deep diving into certain aspects like what are the costs attached to a certain process domain and so on. So this is something that you have to offer basically to the domain architects, to give them a powerful way actually to describe the organization. And it deep dives again one step further for sure when you come to the level of executable processes, either by a system or executable by a certain role in your organization. Then you have the option to describe in many ways, for instance, the business processes as a BPMN model, like you can see it here. So now, taking a step further in the framework, think now of the needs of the management. So what does the manager actually expect as a part of the transformation journey? And thinking again of the single source of truth, the business repository, which stands in the middle. It for sure is all about having relevant KPIs which give you or the management an indication on the health of the organization and what's ongoing in the organization, more from an output viewpoint. So having qualitative information, quantitative information all together, maybe tracking actually the number of change requests which are coming in, maybe tracking the progress of a transformation rollout, seeing which process proposals have been approved already, and making sure that you can run into escalation stages. So there are a lot of different ways actually how the management can look at this common source of truth, and especially through dashboards and KPIs, like you can see it on the screen here, you have it's a very flexible option actually to show quantitative information, management-driven information to the world of management, people who are actually owning what's happening in the business. It's also about thinking of the tasks and the approvals which are ongoing. So as I said before, it's crucial to have an active and committed process owner community established in your organization, and they are taking part of the full journey. They're typically also approving and having an engine which actually supports you in those task management approvals, making sure that you can actually track what has been approved, make sure that you are aware of when the last change has been done, or maybe what a certain description is valid from until which date. So there are a lot of things which are very important actually when you look at from let's say the business repository from a management viewpoint. And what you can see on the slide is one of our example workflows. It's a change request workflow where people actually can submit changes to a certain process owner, which is being mentioned in the repository, and he receives it and has the potential actually to review this, reject it, approve it, and make the change happening in the future. But then it's also about deep diving into root causes. So because we definitely see a huge trend actually towards asking why is an organization not as excellent as it should be, and to ask not only this question and to get an understanding by maybe asking people, it's also about fetching the data from the different systems you have in place and reconstructing the patterns how you did business in the past. And we do this through process mining. So in a nutshell, basically, we reconstruct the business process as it has been performed in the past and are able to compare it to the way how it should be. So that's an example like you can see here. So basically, we show you how a process flow was actually being done for a certain customer case, and we are actively able also to compare, is it really following the plan, and why is it not following the plan? Maybe the plan was wrong, or maybe I have to make sure that in my organizational rollout, I make sure that the people are trained to follow the plan in the future, or maybe I should ask them actually, why aren't they following the plan? So this is definitely something which gets more and more important, to deep dive into what's happening in reality and to compare that to the plans that have been made in order to make sure that you bridge any gaps you have. Then it's about the next stage, thinking about the world of employees. So people who are actually performing the job, doing the job. As I said at the example before, maybe you have the people in your retail store which are working on the shop floor actually, and they have completely different needs maybe compared to the domain architects or to the management stakeholders. For them, it's really important to be not overwhelmed by information, to really quickly get to the point or to the information they actually need. And just as an example, you can see here a role-based entry into the repository where people can easily find for their role all the information they need to get their job done in the most excellent way as the transformation program has described it to be. So this is a really awesome way actually to give end users an easy entry into the repository to filter the information to only show them what they actually need to do. Or maybe then at the next step, people should actually change the way how they do business every day. So they are supposed to do different tasks. They are actually supposed to work with different IT systems. Maybe they have to keep in mind that a certain policy needs to be considered when they're actually performing a certain task. And then it's really important actually to not overwhelm them with, let's say, a language that for domain architects like business process designers is very natural to use. So a BPMN model or EPC model for end users, for employees without a certain training or certain skills. It's much easier to get used or to use basically a simplified content views like the example you see here on the screen. So this is the so-called steps view, which reduces automatically a BPMN model or an EPC, an event-driven process chain, to the very basics, and people can simply click through the process and see, what do I need to do at this step? With whom do I have to talk to actually? What documents do I need? You can even download the document from this situation, or maybe click on the IT system to get the job done. And then it's, as we are living in a world where the search really rules, it's for sure, if you have not found the information that you need, it's about having a powerful entry through search. So you can simply type in what you would like to search for, and you will quickly find it. Maybe you have to deep dive a bit, have to filter a bit when your search was too fuzzy, but in the end, search and the powerful search is very crucial to get the people to the final result. Now think of the world of supporters. Maybe these are all the people that I mentioned before already, but maybe people who have some additional function, because they definitely can help you to make the transformation a special success, because they talk to people, maybe they have especially good ideas that you should consider. And for them, it's definitely worth to think of how you can introduce them or make sure that they are part of the journey. And collaboration is something which is an awesome feature in order to make sure that people can really take part of a transformation journey by asking questions, by giving feedback, by maybe discussing something before it's actually being finished. And yeah, I just can encourage you actually to take care of such a social collaboration and to use the wisdom of the crowd really as a part of your transformation journey. But it's not just collaboration journey. But it's not just collaboration. Maybe you also have people who are not domain architects, but who have actually valuable information in their head, because they are doing a certain job, they are taking care of certain things. Maybe HR is not a business process modeler, they are not domain architects, but they definitely own the HR descriptions, the role descriptions of your company. And you can definitely make all the different people, even without expert skills, part of your transformation journey. So you give them option to easily get use of those simplified views and to contribute to the central source of truth, to the single source of truth, to the central repository. So what you see here on the slide is a role description that's being submitted by the HR colleagues and not being submitted by a modeler. And it's just simply putting into a form the description, submitting it, and yeah, then it can already be part of the repository, depending on how you set up your repository. And then it's also about having structured collaboration, having governance workflows established. So I mentioned that already before. So if you're coming from a structured repository and you definitely want to make sure that this is something which is being applied in the full organization, you have to make sure that you have process owners in place. You have to make sure that you have a structured way how you manage changes, the roll-in of your changes, but also the roll-out of changes, that you can approve them, that you can track, that you maybe can publish release notes about the changes which come along with the transformation journey. And governance workflows help you quite a lot through this journey. So I also can encourage you also to think of getting use of governance workflows to structure the way how you get content into the repository, but also how this content is being actively updated all the time. So this is also very important. So let's get to the summary. So from my perspective, it's very much when you think of transformation, you have to think of how. So transformation is not just about what you would like to achieve. So it's definitely also about, and I think that was all the presentation was about, how you can achieve it, how you can do it in order to make a certain goal happening at the end of the day. I think it was also clear that the needs of the different stakeholders in your transformation are very, very crucial. As I said, the bait is for the fish and the bait is not for the fisherman. And this for sure applies to all the different stakeholders. Like when we remember, we had the world of domain architects, we have the world of management, we have the world of employees without a dedicated role, and we have the world of your supporters. They all are different people, maybe they have different expectations, but they definitely, you should think of them, you should get an understanding of them. What I like a lot in the context of, you might have heard that of user experience research, think of the personas, think of those people. Think of maybe prototypical people that you know, which really represent a certain target group within those different domains, and make sure that you talk to them basically, and that you get an understanding what they need in order to make sure that they stand behind you when you are running through a transformation journey. I think it's also something which is quite important that you think a bit more analytic. Maybe you're doing that already as of today, but I introduced the picture of a house that you would like to plan, to build, to run, and to improve, to reinvent. And you see you have to manage a lot of aspects and dependencies. And just imagine your company is a house, and you definitely want to have the house and all the things which are happening within the house in a very excellent way being executed all the day. And what's belonging to this journey? What do you have to think of? What do you have to manage? What do you have to describe? What do you have to change? And so on. establish the truth. I think this is something which sounds obvious, but I think it's the most crucial thing at all, because when you see people coming from different backgrounds, just take the example, you have people coming from business, maybe they started business administration, you have people coming from the IT world, coming from informatics, information systems, they're talking a different language. And it's important at the end that you have people talking the same language, to have the same understanding on what you would like to achieve, and also have same descriptions on what's the scope of what you're going to change, and so on and so on. And this definitely is, from my perspective, one of the most important things, that you are able to establish a single source of truth with a common language. You might also call this a common business repository, a common meta model in your organization, which definitely gives you a way to describe how you do the business. And I think it's keep it also simple. I really would like to recommend to not oversimplify, so that's something that we see also quite often, unfortunately. But definitely keep it simple, but be sure that you can still be as powerful as you need to be in the future. So as I've shown you the different levels of maturity, with level 1 coming from no processes, level 0, no processes, level 1, having document processes, level 3, structured processes or structured repository, you definitely run through the vision. And you have to have an understanding where you want to be in the near future and also in the far future. And you have to make sure that the platform you are using in order to run through the transformation journey definitely helps you through the full journey. So it doesn't help you if you are working with a platform which stops at level 0 or which stops at level 1, and then you cannot proceed with making sure that the end users are taking care of information, or that you can have an active process owner community established, or that you have not the option to adapt workflows according to your needs, or many reasons. So just keep in mind, try to be simple, try to be focused on what you're doing, but make sure that you do not sacrifice your future in order to oversimplify. So that was already it. So we're already coming to the end, and I think we now have some time for questions.
Hi, Dominik, thanks. We unfortunately don't have any questions as of just now, so we can take a pause here for 30 seconds if anybody does want to submit their questions. With that said, while we're waiting, I'm just going to bring to everybody's attention that our next program is on November 27th. That is titled The 5 Best Kept Secrets of Successful IoT Projects. And again, we still haven't had any questions come in, Dominik, since that little bit ago. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for the time and the presentation today. With that, our program has ended. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.